almost 19 million voters have swung in behind Emmanuel Macron yesterday. Some of them because they have been convinced, of course, by his program. They are convinced with the man, with what he did for the past 5 years. But we have to say that some of them also vote for him because they just have backed him to keep the far right out of power. So we have to say that in Australia and in France, it's very different because there in Australia, when you have an election, the vote is mandatory. So you look at the results, taking into consideration that you have 100% of voters. But here in France, the vote is not compulsory. So even if he has done 58%, so we can say it looks like a convincing victory. Actually, if you look closer, the turnout was a bit under 72%. So it means that 28% of French people haven't voted yesterday. So this 72% was the lowest in a presidential runoff since 1969. So if we look at all the million people voting for Marine Le Pen yesterday and all the million people not showing up at the election, Emmanuel Macron had almost 27 million people not voting for him, actually.
Yeah, which then, comes to his vow to unite France. The question has to be, how much of a mandate does he have and how tough is this task to unite a very divided country going to be?
It's going to be tough, yes. It will be. Emmanuel Macron is really realistic about the people being skeptical with him as a president. And yesterday, during his victory speech, he said, I quote, "No one will be left by the wayside." So Emmanuel Macron now is really talking to people who haven't voted for him in the first round, or who haven't voted for him yesterday, or who have voted for him, but as a protest vote. So he knows it's going to be very, very hard. I'd say Emmanuel Macron has two main challenges right now. The first one is the pension reform. It's a reform he wanted to do 5 years ago, but because of the yellow vest and because of some other gatherings with COVID, he couldn't do his laws about the pension reform. So this is one challenge. And the other one is the cost of living, because prices have rising in France, of course, like everywhere else. And Emmanuel Macron knows that he is still seen as arrogant for some people and as the president for the rich people. So it's a main challenge for him. But having said that, we know for sure that Emmanuel Macron won't seek re-election in 5 years, because in France you only can be a president for 2 mandates, so for 10 years. So Emmanuel Macron won't seek re-election in 5 years. So it's going to be a mandate very, very different than the first one. So he will probably put his ideas stronger this time.
Yeah, because he doesn't need to maintain that popularity that he might have in the first term. That's interesting. Le Pen, of course, the best result that she's ever achieved. She says she was pleased with the result. What do you think this means for her political future?
Yeah, so Marine Le Pen was the first one yesterday to speak, and during her speech, she immediately conceded a defeat, but yet have spoken about victory. As you said, with her almost 42% of the votes, she secured the far right's highest share of the votes yet. So it's kind of a victory for her party, especially when you compare with what her dad was doing in the previous years. So she did a bit better than 5 years ago with 13.3 million votes yesterday. But as we say, she had 13.3 million votes yesterday, but 13.6 million people didn't come to vote yesterday. So actually, Marine Le Pen didn't arrive second. She arrived third after Emmanuel Macron and after the abstention. And to answer the second part of your question about her political future, we thought that maybe Marine Le Pen could yesterday announce that she would quit politics after her defeat. And actually, she didn't do so. And she even said the opposite, that she will keep running for election and that she will keep leading her party, so the National Rally. And now her main goal is to remain in place in the lower chamber, l'Assemblée nationale, as we say in France, because in June we do have the parliamentary election. And Marine Le Pen's goal now is to win local elections and stay a member of the parliament.
So let's talk a little bit about those parliamentary elections, very critical in terms of who will form the government and whether they'll be in sync with Emmanuel Macron. Is it likely that his party will get the bulk of the seats?
So far, Emmanuel Macron has a majority in the lower chamber. So for the past 5 years, even if there was lots of social protest, Emmanuel Macron has a majority. So it was a bit easier for him to do laws and pass his laws. But now it's going to be very hard for him to keep his majority. And about that, a poll has just shown that 63% of people would like Emmanuel Macron to lose his majority. And with the extreme parties becoming very strong in France, so Marine Le Pen, we just saw it yesterday, but also remember Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the far left party, who arrived in third position in the first round. Emmanuel Macron could be really in difficulties during this election in June. And if he does lose his majority, we would have what we call in France a cohabitation. It's when the government is led by other parties. And it will be very hard for Emmanuel Macron. What we have to say is the parliamentary election is a bit different. You don't vote for a person such as, but you vote on a local level. So no, Emmanuel Macron has to check if his members of parliament have convinced during the previous years. But if he loses his majority and if La République En Marche, Republic on the Move, which is Emmanuel Macron's parties, if they lose the majority, Emmanuel Macron will be in very difficulties for the next 5 years because the government will be stronger than him to make the laws in France.
Yes.